virtual instruments. Now I've done some bench testing here, and we set up an 80, that's 80 native instrument FM8, a third-party instrument, an audio unit instrument. We set up MIDI tracks that we're sending 8 notes apiece to each of these FM8 synthesizers. That's a total of 640 note polyphony simultaneous. Hit play, you're playing back 640 notes to these third-party instruments, and the CPU meter and digital performer is hovering around 20%. So very, very efficient with pre-rendering of the virtual instrument. It doesn't pre-render on the live stuff you play because it doesn't know what you're going to play yet. Once you've recorded the MIDI track in, then when that MIDI track plays, digital performer looks ahead and renders the instrument. Besides the CPU efficiency, another major benefit of the pre-rendering is that bounce to disk now includes your live instruments. You don't have to record the instruments as audio tracks and then do the bounce to disk. Bounce to disk includes the instruments. Let's show you how that works. I got another session set up here for you. And I'll bring up my FM8 synthesizer. And here's the MIDI track driving the FM8. We'll just listen to a little bit of this. So there's the synthesizer solo being triggered by the MIDI track. I'm going to select 4 bars up here. Up to the audio menu, bounce to disk. Project format, same as source. That's a surround sound mix, so we're going to bounce down to a surround sound file, and we're going to add that file back into the sequence. So we say, go ahead and render that. Digital performer renders all of the audio tracks. It's looking ahead on the synthesizer track, renders the synthesizer track, glues it all together as an audio file, surround sound audio file, and drops it into the track right there. The bounce is faster than real time. So close this, turn off all those tracks, and we'll play back a little bit of that surround sound bounce to this. Okay, there we go. Now while we're on the subject of bouncing to disk, I've got another file I'll show you here. Let's go to the sequence editor. Take a look. We have, okay, Underground. This is a 2-track mix. Here's the Song of 10 Delights. And here's The Rice is Moving. Song of 10 Delights is a long piece of music, as you can see. And I've dropped a marker in to indicate the second movement, the second delight. And I've got a little bit of track spacing in there. I've gone ahead and set the gap between these 2 songs. I'll take a look over here. I'm going to edit this sound file. Bring it a little closer. So we'll check the spacing between the 2 songs. Next song starts. Okay, I like that spacing. What I'm doing is I'm getting ready here to master a CD. So I've got the sequence of the songs, I've got the spacing between the songs. I've dropped a marker in where I want a track index point because that's the second movement of this piece of music. Maybe I've got some automation, maybe I'm using some effects. Digital performer ships the 64-bit mastering effects, so I'm using a mastering limiter, a multi-bank compressor, I've got my mastering equalizer, and the idea is that I do all this work with the automation plugins, the spacing of the tracks, rewind, press play, and I want to listen to my CD from beginning to end. I want to hear what that CD is going to sound like. When I'm happy with all of those edits and all that processing, I'll just select the entire sequence, bounce to disk. This time, we're going to burn an audio CD. We are going to bounce and burn. And you see, we now have track index points that are based on sound bites, markers, or both, sound bites and markers. So these will be the track index points that are created when we make the CD. So if my listener wants to listen to the second movements of the Song of 10 Delights, he can go right to that point with the CD player. Of course, if he plays the song from the beginning, then as it goes past that index point, there's no dropout or gap or anything in there. All I do is press OK. CD tray on my computer pops open, drop in a CD, bounce and burn in a single step. What if I want to make 10 CDs? I want to make 10 copies of the CD. Now, when we bounce and burn, what's happening is we're rendering those audio files with all the effects, the automation, the edits, and so forth. So if every time I make a CD I have to do that rendering, well, this is a more efficient way. first time what I'm going to do is I'm going to bounce and burn to a disk image. Now I've got one disk image that contains the rendered file. I can save that as an archive, of course, make CDs 3 months from now or whenever. And when I make multiple copies of the CD, I don't have to re-render the tracks every time. So bouncing and burning. Audio CD burning right inside Digital Performer. Place your index points with your markers and your sound bites and create a disk image for archiving and duplication. But we're not done yet. We've got so much going on in DP6. We've got 2 new plugins. Let's check out the Proverb. I have a different audio example to play for you here. We're going to start off with a little bit of nylon string guitar with no effect on it. This is a dry guitar other than the NAMM ambience in here. Alright, now let's put a little bit of reverb on that guitar. This is the Proverb. This is a convolution reverb. Convolution reverb is the best kind of reverb you can use. And the reason for that is that it is not simulating ambience. With old-style reverb boxes, there was some sort of algorithm in there that simulated reverb or simulated ambience. But what a convolution reverb is doing is it's using samples of real spaces, audio samples that are called impulse responses. The Proverb ships with its own impulse responses, but you can drag and drop any audio file in as an impulse response. And there's the impulse responses available all over the place. Maybe a friend of yours has a copy of Logic and he's got Space Designer. You can go and grab all the impulse responses from Space Designer and use them inside the Proverb. So it's really limitless in terms of how many different reverbs you can have because you just drop in the impulse responses as you need them. Let's give it a listen. Bigger. Pull down that low frequency buildup. A little bit more high frequency. Most of those frequencies come from years ago, actually. Add some free delay. A little bit of high frequency damping. Now, there's a couple of things that are notable about what I'm doing here. First of all, the Proverb is very, very efficient. Historically, convolution reverbs have been known to be real CPU hogs, not the Proverb. You can use the Proverb on an older, slower computer, but on a fast computer, you can really use as many reverbs as you need in your mix. Very, very CPU efficient. The other thing that's happening here is you'll notice that I'm changing the size of the room, changing the pre-delay and the high-frequency damping as the track is playing, and we're not hearing any glitching or distortion of the audio. So the Proverb doesn't have to stop and recalculate when I make a change to that impulse response. What this means is I can automate these controls, and over time I can morph the size of the room as the instrument is playing in there. So glitch-free changing of the parameters. A couple other interesting features. This is the mix control. I'm using the Proverb on an effect send and return, so typically you have it set to 100% wet when it's on its own effects return. 100% wet, 100% dry. But we have several different mix modes. 3 dB crossfader is what you're used to using as a mix control. We also have something called a 6 dB crossfader. Right. To understand this, think about a pan control. Right? You pan a signal from left to right. When that signal is in the center of the mix, typically what a pan control does is it drops the volume down by 3 dB in the center of the mix. A pan law is in place so that the sound has the same apparent volume as it moves across the sound spectrum in front of you. What we've done here is we have a 6 dB crossfader. In other words, we put a 3 dB additional scoop in the middle of the mix, and middle of the reverb specifically. And the purpose of that is that your dry signal sits in the middle of the image, and the reverb is up around the edges. It gives a clarity to your dry signal and widens out the apparent ambience. We also have effect level, which means we have 100% dry signal going through all the time, but we can blend up your reverb. We have dry level, which means we have 100% reverb all the time, but we can blend in how much of the dry signal we want. So 4 different mix modes. I showed you the 4-band equalizer down here.